When most people imagine a market crash, they think of fear, chaos, and financial devastation. They picture traders losing everything, families being pushed out of their homes, and retirement plans collapsing overnight. But there's something you won't hear in school, the news, or from most financial experts. Every major crash in history has been followed by one of the largest wealth transfers the world has ever seen. And the people who understood how these cycles worked didn't just make it through, they came out richer than they ever expected. The pattern is unmistakable. After the crash of 1929, the small group of investors who bought during the darkest days went on to earn returns so massive that today's tech millionaires would struggle to compete. When the dot-com bubble collapsed in 2000, the investors who stayed calm and picked up strong companies at bargain prices later watched their portfolios grow 10, 20, even 50 times in value. And when the housing market fell apart in 2008, what felt like the end of the financial world actually marked the beginning of the longest and strongest bull market in modern American history. Now we're approaching another turning point. Everywhere you look, the warning signs are flashing. If history continues to follow its usual pattern, what happens in 2026 won't simply be a dip or a correction. It will be a full reset of the financial system, something that changes the landscape for an entire generation. So the real question isn't whether the crash is coming. It's whether you'll be positioned to benefit when it does. Here's the truth most people never hear. Crashes don't erase wealth, they move it. They move it from people who are unprepared to those who are ready, from people who react emotionally to those who think clearly, from those who panic to those who plan. And once you understand what's happening beneath the surface, you can place yourself on the right side of that transfer. To see what's coming, you have to understand the cycle America has followed for more than 100 years. Almost like clockwork, every 18 to 20 years the economy reaches a breaking point. Debt builds up, speculation increases, and the illusion of prosperity collides with reality. It happened in 1929. It happened again during the inflation crisis of the 1970s. It showed up in 2000, then again in 2008. And now, as we move closer to 2026, every major indicator is pointing toward another unavoidable reset. Even the Shiller CAPE ratio, a measure of how expensive stocks are compared to the actual earnings of companies, is sitting near its second highest level in history. The warning signs are everywhere, and the real question now is whether you'll take action while there's still time. Stock prices are extremely high, and the only time they were higher was right before the dot-com crash, a collapse that erased trillions of dollars in value almost overnight. Consumer debt has reached levels that would have seemed impossible just one generation ago. Many companies are burdened with cheap loans that will become extremely expensive as interest rates continue to rise. And government spending has grown so large that even the Federal Reserve is beginning to question how long the current system can hold together. What makes this moment even more concerning is that the same experts who failed to predict every major crash over the last 100 years are now telling people not to worry. They say the economy is strong, unemployment is low, and everything is under control. But these were the same reassurances given in 1999 before the dot-com collapse, and again in 2007 before the housing market fell apart. Both times those predictions were disastrously wrong. Meanwhile, the people who truly understand how markets work, the smart money, are preparing quietly. Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, is holding more than $300 billion in cash, the most it has ever kept on the sidelines. Major hedge funds are shifting into safer investments and increasing their holdings of precious metals. Large institutions are slowly moving away from overpriced growth stocks and into assets that tend to hold their value during economic turmoil. At the same time, the unemployment rate is expected to rise to nearly 5% by September 2026. Many economists estimate there is a 40% chance of a recession. But historically, these same economists have almost never predicted the timing or severity of major downturns correctly, which means the real risk is likely much higher. We're already seeing cracks in the system. Manufacturing is slowing. Consumer confidence is weakening. Credit card defaults are increasing. Commercial real estate is under growing pressure. These aren't vague statistics or distant trends. They're clear signs that the economy is shifting and that a major change is coming. These signs aren't random or meaningless. They're early warnings of a major financial shock building beneath the surface. But here's where the difference between the wealthy and everyone else becomes clear. Most people look at a crisis and see danger. The wealthy look at the same moment and see possibility. They understand that market crashes aren't just moments of destruction. They are predictable transfers of wealth. Money and assets move from people who are unprepared to those who have been patient, disciplined, and ready. They move from people who borrowed too much or chased risky bets to those who saved, stayed steady, and focused on real long-term value. Think back to the 2008 financial crisis. While millions of people lost their homes, jobs, and savings, a small group of prepared investors earned life-changing fortunes. They bought real estate for a fraction of its true worth. They purchased shares of top companies at prices so low it almost looked unreal. They even acquired entire businesses for pennies on the dollar. The same thing happened during the dot-com crash. Amazon, which had traded for over $100, dropped to just $6. Netflix cost less than a monthly subscription. Companies like Apple and Google, now giants of the modern world, were selling at prices so cheap they seemed like clearance items. The investors who recognized these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and had the confidence to take action didn't just protect their wealth, they multiplied it to levels they never thought possible. This pattern has repeated in every major crash throughout history. During the Great Depression, John D. Rockefeller famously said that fortunes are made when blood is running in the streets. While businesses collapsed and people waited in bread lines, those with cash and foresight bought assets. Oil companies, railroads, manufacturing giants, at prices so low they would never return again. The core truth is straightforward. Market crashes aren't random events. They happen for reasons that repeat throughout history, and they create opportunities that only people who are calm, prepared, and informed can use to their advantage. Crashes follow patterns shaped by human behavior and basic math. Times of easy money and wild speculation always end in the same way. Debt that feels manageable when everything is going well becomes overwhelming when conditions shift. Prices of homes, stocks, and other assets that seem justified during a boom suddenly fall back to their normal levels, and they often do so very quickly. That same pattern is forming again right now. We are living through the largest explosion of debt ever recorded. Businesses owe more than they did before the 2008 crisis. Government spending is growing so fast that even the US dollar, as the world's reserve currency, may not be enough to support it forever. Many households are relying on credit cards and personal loans just to keep up, assuming the future will always be brighter than the present. At the same time, asset prices, stocks, real estate, bonds, have been pushed to extreme levels by years of low interest rates and unprecedented money printing. Stock prices in many cases no longer match the true strength of the companies behind them. Real estate in many areas has become so expensive that entire generations can no longer afford to buy homes. Bond values are based on the belief that governments will always be able to repay their debts, even as those debts grow at record speed. But numbers don't bend to wishes. Interest rates are rising because inflation is still stubborn. Governments are spending more and more just to keep up with the interest they owe. companies are dealing with higher labor costs and slowing sales. Consumers are reaching the limits of their borrowing, and many are struggling to keep up with rising monthly payments. Everything we're seeing right now points toward a large correction, one that could be even more serious than the crash of 2008. But here's what most people miss. A crash doesn't destroy real value. It simply reveals what was real all along and exposes what was overpriced or built on hype. Strong companies will still stand and eventually grow again. Good real estate will still have long-term value, even if its price drops for a while. Precious metals will continue to act as reliable stores of value when confidence in paper money weakens. The difference between people who come out of a crash stronger and those who come out weaker isn't luck, it's preparation. Those who understand what's happening ahead of time can use the chaos to their advantage, while those who aren't prepared get swept away by it. The first step is recognizing that most people's financial habits are working against them. Many approach money as consumers, not investors. They buy when prices are high because everyone else seems confident, and they sell when prices fall because fear takes over. This pattern almost guarantees they'll lose during every major shift in the economy. Investing successfully during a crash requires doing the opposite of what your instincts tell you. When people around you are celebrating rising markets and dreaming about retiring early, that's the moment to save cash and prepare for the downturn that always follows. When fear fills the news and people believe everything is collapsing, that's when the greatest opportunities appear. The wealthy understand this because they've watched it happen over and over again. They know that fear creates the best buying conditions in history. They know that when others are desperate to sell, valuable assets become available at prices that are unimaginable during normal times. The wealthy understand that patience and preparation always outperform emotion and guesswork. In a financial crisis, cash becomes incredibly powerful, not because it keeps you safe, but because it creates opportunity. When you have money available while others are being forced to sell, you can buy valuable assets at prices that can produce returns for decades. This is exactly what happened before the 2008 crash. Investors who saved money during the boom years of 2006 and 2007 were able to buy homes, stocks, and even entire businesses at bargain prices, setting themselves up for long-term wealth. However, simply holding cash isn't enough. You also need to know which assets will hold their value during a crisis and which ones will fall apart. History makes this very clear. Quality always rises to the top. Companies with strong finances, steady earnings, and products or services people genuinely need almost always survive downturns. In fact, they often come out stronger. They use the chaos to buy struggling competitors, grow their influence, and prepare for the recovery that eventually follows every crash. Real estate shows the same pattern. Properties in good locations may lose value for a while, but they remain useful and desirable in the long run. On the other hand, risky developments in less appealing areas often drop so much in value that investors never recover. That's why the goal is to focus on assets that have true value no matter what is happening in the economy. Precious metals also play an important role, but not in the way many people assume. Gold and silver won't necessarily make you rich during a crisis. Instead, they protect your purchasing power when confidence in money weakens or when financial systems become unstable. They act more like insurance, something you hope you never have to use, but you're grateful to have if the system around you starts to break down. Timing your decisions matters far more than most people realize. If you wait until a crash has already begun, it's like trying to buy fire insurance while your house is already burning. The real opportunities appear long before the crash. During the period when debt is rising, prices are inflated, and everyone feels confident. That's the moment to save cash, study strong investments, and get yourself ready for the reset that always comes. Dollar cost averaging can be a powerful strategy during downturns, but only if you use it wisely. Instead of investing the same amount no matter what, you increase your buying when prices fall and slow down when prices rise. This lets you collect more shares of valuable assets when they're cheap and fewer when they're expensive. It's simple in theory but very challenging emotionally, because your surroundings will push you in the opposite direction. During the build-up phase, financial news will celebrate new highs and claim the good times will last forever. People around you may be earning easy profits and wondering why you're staying cautious. The pressure to join the hype can feel overwhelming. But the moment the crash arrives, everything flips. The same news outlets will predict endless decline. Your friends, co-workers, and family may panic and warn you not to invest. Your instincts will tell you to hold onto every dollar and wait for certainty. Yet this is exactly when the biggest fortunes are created, when fear is highest and hope is lowest. That's when strong assets can be bought at prices that would never be possible under normal conditions. The people who invested during the darkest days of 2008 and 2009 weren't lucky or unusually gifted. They were simply disciplined enough to act when the situation felt most frightening. When preparing for a market crash, diversification takes on a deeper meaning. It's not just about putting your money into different investment categories. It's about spreading your opportunities across different types of value. Some investments will help protect your wealth when the economy declines, while others will set you up to grow quickly once the recovery begins. When you combine both, you build a portfolio that can benefit no matter what happens next. Debt becomes extremely dangerous during a financial crisis because it can force you to sell your investments at the worst possible time. People who look like financial geniuses during the boom often become the biggest losers during the crash. When the market turns, they're pushed to sell just to keep up with interest payments or margin calls, often at steep losses. Staying out of unnecessary debt gives you the freedom to buy valuable assets, while others are being forced to sell them. The companies that perform well in chaotic times tend to share a few clear traits. They hold plenty of cash, keep their debts low, and provide products or services people need no matter how the economy is doing. These businesses not only survive downturns, they often come out stronger by gaining customers and expanding while their weaker competitors fall behind. Understanding how governments respond during crises also helps you prepare. Leaders almost always choose policies that create inflation rather than allow deflation, because inflation makes debt easier to manage. As a result, cash tends to lose buying power over time, while assets that cannot be endlessly reproduced, such as real estate, strong companies, or precious metals, often rise in value. The goal is to keep enough cash on hand for opportunities, while protecting most of your wealth in real, lasting assets. Finally, spreading your investments across different countries becomes important when your home economy faces serious risk. Crises rarely hit every nation equally or at the same time. By having exposure to global markets, currencies, and assets, you protect yourself from problems in one region and gain access to opportunities that may exist elsewhere. The real advantage of investing during a market crash is how powerful the returns can become later. Buying strong, long-lasting assets when prices are extremely low doesn't just protect your money. It sets you up for major growth once the economy recovers. When you buy valuable assets for only a fraction of their true worth, the gains you can make in the years that follow are far greater than what you would earn in normal market conditions. But taking advantage of these moments requires emotional strength. Crash-level opportunities are always obvious after everything is over, but in the moment they feel overwhelming and frightening. Markets are falling, news is negative, and everyone around you is scared. That's why having a clear plan and sticking to it, even when everything seems uncertain, matters so much. Most people panic or freeze during these times. The ones who stay calm, follow their strategy, and make smart decisions while others are fearful are the ones who benefit the most from these major shifts in wealth. Right now, the groundwork for the next massive wealth transfer is already being put in place, but many people are distracted by the wrong conversations. While the world debates artificial intelligence, electric cars, and automation, the real transformation is happening in the global financial system. Central banks are preparing for changes far bigger than what we saw in 2008. In the United States, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet has grown from under $1 trillion before the 2008 crisis to more than $8 trillion today. In Europe, central banks have pushed interest rates so low that borrowers are essentially rewarded for taking loans. In Japan, the central bank has become so aggressive that it now buys more government bonds than the government issues each year. These actions were once considered temporary solutions for emergencies. Now they've become a normal part of how the financial system operates, because the system can no longer support itself without constant help. But this kind of artificial support cannot last forever. Government debt has grown so large that even small increases in interest rates could overwhelm national budgets. Many companies that should have failed long ago are being kept alive by cheap borrowing, blocking new, stronger businesses from emerging. Meanwhile, asset prices, stocks, real estate, and other investments have been pushed to levels that make past bubbles look small. The truth behind this situation is harsh but straightforward. Our financial system is being pushed far beyond what it can safely handle, and it cannot operate like this forever without serious consequences. When debt grows faster than the economy's ability to manage it, something eventually breaks. Either the debt is paid back using money that becomes less valuable over time, or the debt fails altogether and takes down the institutions connected to it. Both outcomes shift wealth, but in very different ways. When the value of money is slowly weakened, what many people call inflation, those who own real assets benefit, while those who hold cash or fixed income investments lose purchasing power. Homes, stocks, commodities, and precious metals usually keep up with rising prices. But savings accounts, bonds, and pensions fall behind, buying less and less each year. This type of wealth shift has been happening quietly for decades, but it speeds up dramatically during times of crisis. Debt defaults, on the other hand, create a much faster kind of wealth transfer. When borrowers can't make their payments, lenders are forced to take losses, and valuable assets are sold at extremely low prices. Investors who have cash ready can buy these assets for pennies on the dollar, while the original owners often lose everything they spent years trying to build. This is the kind of wealth shift we saw during events like the 2008 financial crisis. Today's financial system is experiencing both of these forces at the same time. Governments and central banks are trying to prevent mass defaults by creating more money. But that same money creation leads to inflation, which slowly eats away at the value of savings and fixed income investments. Eventually, the inflation becomes so intense that people lose trust in the currency itself. And that loss of confidence triggers the very crisis the authorities were trying to avoid. The result is a painful combination: slow, steady loss followed by sudden collapse. Experienced investors recognize how this cycle works and position themselves accordingly. They use low-cost borrowing to buy real assets, fully aware that inflation will reduce the real weight of their debt while increasing the value of what they own. They stay away from fixed income investments that lose value when the currency weakens. Instead, they build cash reserves during inflationary periods, so they have the flexibility to buy valuable assets at discounted prices when a crisis causes widespread defaults. In this way, They benefit from both the slow and sudden phases of the wealth transfer cycle. The global nature of financial crises creates even more opportunities for those who study how different regions react. Economic disasters almost never hit every country at the same time or with the same intensity. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis devastated Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea, while other markets remained relatively stable. During the European debt crisis that began in 2010, countries like Greece, Portugal, and Spain suffered heavily, while stronger economies such as Germany and the Netherlands actually gained advantages. The next major crisis will likely follow the same pattern, with some areas collapsing and others strengthening. Currency movements become especially important during these times. People who hold assets in strong currencies, while living in countries with weakening currencies, can maintain their buying power even as local prices skyrocket. Buying real estate with a strong currency, such as dollars, in a country where the local currency is falling, can protect you from inflation and may lead to huge gains when measured back in the stronger currency. The key is identifying which currencies are likely to rise and which are likely to fall before the crisis makes the trend clear to everyone. Commodity cycles also interact with financial cycles in predictable ways. When investors lose confidence in paper money, the prices of energy, metals, and agricultural goods usually rise sharply. But during the later stages of a crisis, when economic activity slows and demand drops, these same commodities can fall just as quickly. Knowing this pattern helps investors benefit on both sides. Buying before money printing pushes prices higher, and selling before recession pulls them down. The technology industry adds even more complexity to financial crises. Many tech companies depend on cheap borrowing and promises of future growth, rather than real profits today. When borrowing becomes more expensive, and investors start demanding proven results instead of big promises, these companies can quickly run into trouble. But tech companies that solve real problems and already generate solid profits often come out of downturns even stronger, especially as weaker competitors fail or disappear. Artificial intelligence and automation usually speed up during economic stress because businesses want to cut costs and improve efficiency. This opens the door for companies that build and support these technologies, while creating challenges for workers whose jobs may be automated. This shift results in a powerful transfer of wealth. Business owners benefit from higher productivity, while employees may face reduced job security and lower bargaining power. Energy independence also becomes extremely important during global financial turmoil. Countries and households that can produce their own energy have far more control over their economic future than those that rely on imported fuel, especially when those imports must be paid for with a weakening currency. Technologies like solar panels, home batteries, and other forms of local energy production can provide both financial savings and protection during periods of inflation or broken supply chains. Food security follows a similar pattern but unfolds differently over time. In short-term crises, having stored food can protect you from sudden shortages and price spikes. In long-term inflation, owning farmland or having the ability to produce your own food can shield you from steadily rising grocery costs. In both cases, the advantage shifts from people who rely entirely on fragile supply chains to those who prepare and maintain their own reserves. The insurance industry also faces major risks during severe financial crises. Insurance companies promise to pay future claims using assets that might lose value during inflation or market crashes. This creates a dangerous situation where people think they're protected, only to find out their policies may not hold up when they need them most. In uncertain times, owning real, tangible assets often becomes a more reliable form of protection than depending on companies that may not survive the crisis. Healthcare costs usually rise during financial crises because stress leads to more illness. At the same time, people have less money for treatment. This makes life harder for families and shows why staying healthy and preparing ahead of time is so important. It also creates opportunities for companies that offer affordable healthcare solutions, while putting pressure on people who rely on employer-provided insurance that may vanish if they lose their jobs. In times like these, taking care of your physical health becomes both a personal responsibility and a smart financial decision. Education and skill building also become more important when traditional career paths start to break down. People who can adapt to new industries and changing economic conditions have far more choices than those whose skills are no longer useful. However, taking on large student loans can be dangerous during tough economic periods, especially if the degree doesn't lead to the expected level of income. The safest approach is to build valuable skills without taking on heavy debt. Strong social connections become incredibly important during crises. When large institutions fail to provide support, families, friends, and local communities often step in to help each other. People who are part of supportive networks have clear advantages over those who try to manage everything alone. In difficult times, the value shifts from big, distant systems to close, personal relationships. Being able to move to new locations also becomes a major advantage when local economies decline. People with the flexibility to relocate for better opportunities are in a stronger position than those stuck in place because of mortgages, family pressures, or government rules. This mobility advantage grows during financial crises, especially when different regions experience the downturn at different levels of severity. During major economic crises, governments often introduce policies that would seem impossible in normal times. When leaders are desperate for money and control, and when the public is scared enough to accept dramatic changes, governments may impose strict limits on moving money, add new taxes on wealth, or even take private property. These actions show how quickly laws can change when fear spreads through a country. Understanding these risks early and taking steps to protect yourself before they become obvious can help preserve wealth that might otherwise be lost. The hardest part of preparing for a financial crisis is timing. If you act too early, you might miss out on growth and spend years waiting for a crisis that unfolds more slowly than expected. If you act too late, the opportunities may already be gone because asset prices will have adjusted. The most effective strategy is to prepare gradually and increase your actions as warning signs become clearer. The math behind crisis investing can create results that seem unbelievable in normal times. Buying assets at half their usual price and waiting for them to return to normal value doubles your money. Buying at a 70% discount can produce returns of 300% or more. These aren't fantasy calculations. History shows that they happen again and again during major downturns. But the biggest wealth growth happens when you reinvest the profits made during the crash into the recovery that follows. Investors who bought during the 2008 to 2009 crash and then reinvested their gains throughout the bull market that came afterward achieved life-changing results. This combination of buying during fear and compounding during recovery is how generational wealth is created. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but the patterns are always similar. The next major downturn isn't coming to destroy your future. It's coming to create opportunity. The real question isn't whether you'll make it through what's ahead. The question is whether you'll be ready to take advantage of one of the biggest wealth transfer moments of your lifetime.